Okay, sir. Thank you. Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, you are audible. Yes.
Yeah. Very good afternoon to one and all present here. Today, once again, we gather here for the fourth workshop under the workshop series titled Building Inclusive Cities for a Resilient and Sustainable Future. Today, we have three eminent speakers to speak upon the topic Mobility and Transport for Sustainable Development, who are going to disseminate their knowledge and research experience about this topic today. Now, I would like to take an opportunity to call Dr. Adinarayan sir, coordinator of this workshop series, to give welcome address. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Prashanti.
Sir, unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Prashanti. Good afternoon to all. Distinguished expert from United Nations Human Settlement Program, Ms. Parul Agarwala, Country Program Manager, Ms. Manshi Sachidev, Senior Urban Planner, respected speakers, Ms. Stephanie Holsworth, Urban Mobility Team, UN Habitat, and Mr. Yugi Takada, Urban Mobility Team, UN Habitat, Architect Valyappan, Assistant Professor, Department of Planning, SPAV Vijayawada. Respected Director, Professor Dr. Ramesh Srikonda sir, Deans, HODs, faculty members, and my dear students. On behalf of SPA Vijayawada, I welcome you all for today's fourth workshop under the theme Mobility and Transport for Sustainable Development of workshop series on building inclusive cities for resilient and sustainable future. Countries all over the world are pushing for adoption for more sustainable and greener lifestyles. Paris Agreement signed by 195 countries across the globe for environmental conservation is a step in the right direction. In lieu of that, we need to put in efforts in the times to come to ensure we meet our sustainable development goals. Contribution of gasoline and diesel powered automobiles to global warming is one of the most pressing issues in our time. The future of India's mobility, sustainable mobility, is a compelling concept that can lead to many positive outcomes for the people and the economy of entire nation. Over the next decade, with investment in innovative technology, building out public transport infrastructure, and deregulating pilot projects, India has the potential to become a leader in efficient passenger commuting. The need is to reduce our dependence on internal combustion engine (IC) vehicles and use renewable resources for energy generation. Promote battery swapping to make electrical vehicles more accessible and establish captive solar farms for the rural systems. These are the stepping stones to ensuring clean mobility. That is nothing but reduced congestion, low carbon footprint, and reduced travel time. At this juncture, with this few words, I hope this workshop series will inculcate new thinking, gaining knowledge from real-time case studies and best practices across the globe. I once again welcome you all for today's event. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, I am delighted to invite our director, Professor Dr. Ramesh Srikonda sir, for inaugural address.
Thank you, Dr. Prashanti. Good afternoon to all distinguished experts from the United Nations Human Settlement Program, Ms. Parul Agarwal, Country Program Manager, Ms. Manshi Sachidev, Senior Urban Planner, respected speakers, Ms. Stephanie Holsworth, Program Manager Officer and Urban Mobility Team of UN Habitat, and Mr. Yogi Takada and Associate Expert, Urban Mobility Team UN Habitat, as well as Architect Valyappan, Assistant Professor, School of Planning and Architecture, Vijayawada, from the Department of Planning. Deans, HODs, faculty members, all my dear students, all distinguished participants attending this program, even online. Greetings to each one of you present here and online mode. I'm delighted to be present here today and to inaugurate and chair the opening ceremony of the workshop series on building inclusive cities for resilient and sustainable future. The fourth workshop under the theme of mobility and transport for sustainable development. As of now, SPA Vijayawada, in collaboration with UN Habitat, has successfully conducted 3 workshops out of 10 workshops scheduled in this year, 2023. We have received tremendous response from academicians, researchers, and industrial communities, and this workshop series helps to gain more advanced knowledge on real-time updates in the field of planning and architecture. Further, these workshop special lectures are being live streamed and disseminated to the other MOU partnership institutions of SPA Vijayawada with international repute and prestigious Indian universities. The main topic is on cities on move, specifically that transport and climate. Particularly today's theme is on mobility and transport for sustainable development. The transport sector produces almost 23% of the global energy related carbon dioxide emissions. Despite ongoing technological and fuel economy improvements, the figure is projected to increase to 50% by 2035 and almost double by 2050. Because of this increase, to say further, given that the transport sector is one of the main source of emissions, if you look at it, many countries, cities have set up their goals and taken steps to mitigate emissions and also adapt to climate change and associated challenges in the system. So, with increased urbanization, urban India is expected to house 40% of Indians' population and contribute almost 75% of the GDP by 2030. This kind of a rapid urbanization during last few decades have given a rise to urban transport related challenges in India, and to guide future developments, Government of India also formulated the National Urban Transport Policy in 2006, includes the paradigm shift, deploying experts for planning our regions, cities, and neighborhoods. This implies specifically providing for increased mobility choice from dependence on private vehicles to available of good public transport and safe non-motorized transport also. By the way, the three sustainable development concepts such as transit-oriented development, non-motorized transport, and public bike sharing, and so on and so forth. There are so many things are there. Yeah, these are the three important items which got focused so far now. There are essential steps towards achieving the comprehensive urban transport system for more workable, sustainable development and alternatives. Basically, the goal of sustainable transportation is to ensure that environment, social and economical considerations are factored into decisions affecting transportation activity. With these few words, I take this opportunity to declare this official opening of workshop 4 session, Mobility and Transport for Sustainable Development. I wish you all present here for today's interesting and beneficial session. Thank you once again. Now I request Dr. Prashanti Rao, Assistant Professor in Department of Architecture, SPAV, to give introduction of our experts to start with. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for your insightful words. We shall proceed now towards our first presentation in this workshop series. Prior to that, I'm delighted to introduce our two speakers of our first session. One is I welcome Stephanie Holsworth. Ma'am, Stephanie Holsworth is a program management officer at the Urban Mobility Team at the United Nations Human Settlement Program. She is trained in geography and urban planning and has been working on sustainable mobility projects for more than 8 years, providing technical advice, knowledge, and advocacy to governments around the world. Previously, she worked in a participatory urban development program at GIZ in Cairo, Egypt. Stephanie is a passionate cyclist and regularly participates in open streets activities or critical mass events to create awareness of the pedestrians and the cyclists' rights to shared urban roads. Welcome back. And I would also like to introduce the second speaker who is sharing the session with Stephanie. Uh, Yuki Takada is an associate expert at the urban mobility team at the United Nations Human Settlement Program. Yuki focuses on transport and urban planning to expand non-motorized and public transport options for cities and implement sustainable transport strategies. Before joining UN Habitat, Yuki worked as a chief consultant at an engineering consulting firm where he led projects for international donors and governments on urban development planning and technical advisory projects, mainly in Southeast Asia. Yuki is qualified professional engineer and holds a Masters of Engineering from the University of Tokyo. Now I welcome both Yuki and Stephanie to start the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rao, and also very nice to meet you, Dr. Satish, and respected Professor Ramesh. It's very much a pleasure for us to be here and to be collaborating in this lecture series. Being an urban planner, I'm very excited to also be collaborating in this event with an urban planning and architecture department, because that's also the field where I have come from to then join the transport discussions on a global level. Yuki and I will be collaborating on the presentation from side of UN Habitat. I'll be starting with a bit of a higher level framework that speaks a little bit about the mandate of UN Habitat on the global level. And then we decided as a team that we would like to introduce the concept of transit-oriented development a little bit more strongly, which is then the part that Yuki is taking over, because we feel that's a very important concept for the urban planning practitioners when it comes to transport. So that's how we're dividing our presentation. I'll be sharing a few slides, and you let me know if you can see my screen in 1 second. Are you able to see the screen?
Ma'am, yes, ma'am.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Very good. All right. So once again, welcome also to all the students. My name is Stephanie Holzwart, and I work in the headquarters of UN Habitat. We're actually headquartered in Nairobi in Kenya. What I find very excited about the concept of sustainable mobility is that it really contributes to the different global agendas. On the one side, we have the Sustainable Development Goals, where sustainable urban mobility can really help end poverty, protect the planet, and also ensure prosperity for all under this framework of leaving no one behind. From the Sustainable Development Goals, the new urban agenda was developed, which is in a way the guiding framework for especially UN Habitat, being the cities agency. And this this new urban agenda is kind of the guiding framework for urban action until 2030. And here it becomes very obvious that sustainable urban mobility can play a very key role in providing universal access for all. And then lastly, it was also already mentioned by the professor before, is that sustainable urban mobility can really also contribute to the Climate Paris Agreement by reducing transport emissions and pollutions. What we notice more and more is that many cities are growing out rather than up. And that really results in a situation where cities are fighting with urban sprawl, lower densities, and so on. Maybe just mentioning some of the cities that are listed here, Lagos and Dhaka, but I think this is really a situation that many cities are currently facing, where the urban growth rather happens outwards and not really upwards. And that leaves us with a reality where we see a lot of car-based corridors coming up in cities. We have very low densities in some of the parts of the urban spaces, with urban sprawl causing a lot of issues. Car-based transit corridors that are contributing to congestion, emission, pollution, accidents. And very often there's also a rather poor integration between the different mobility systems. So kind of having, standalone systems very often with different operators that are not integrating within each other. At the same time, land use systems have not been able to provide access through proximity, as access is mostly dependent on movement, and that movement very often happens in private cars and private motorization. And we also face a situation where very often the urban poor are living in the outskirts of the cities with very limited access and access to transport modes, and therefore also high transport costs that are related to that. That creates a situation where we have congestion, and many cities are responding in the way that they would be expanding and widening the roadway. That contributes to faster driving, attracts more people in their cars, driving again, adding to more congestion. So we're kind of facing this situation where it's really a kind of a loop of congestion, expanding roadways, adding to congestion, and so on. So that really leaves cities with a big question of what can they do to promote more sustainable urban mobility systems. Many cities are currently at a crossroads where they still have the opportunity to decide with which pathway to take. And the good news is that there is very many cities around the world that already have learned a lot of lessons. And I think there's a great opportunity to avoid some of those evolutionary mistakes that some cities have gotten themselves into, and instead leapfrog to sustainable urban mobility. The dots that you can see in blue are cities in developing countries. And there's a big opportunity to decouple private motorization from the growth of the GDP. So really decouple private motorization from economic development. And that would mean that cities would have to invest in integrated multimodal transport systems and move to the right by expanding their GDP, but not necessarily resulting in also additions in private cars and private motorization. We really have to change our reality, and UN Habitat is really promoting a move from urban sprawl to more compactness in cities, from segregation to integration, and from congestion to connectivity. And that's really, in a way, the basis on which we provide our technical advice. UN Habitat is responsible for collecting the data on access to public transport on a global level. And this is, in a way, this graphic is illustrating the current situation where we only have roughly half of the world's population that has access to a public transport system. And then you can see that there is very big regional disparities, with Western Asia and Northern Africa being on the low levels of accessibility, while, for example, Europe, Australia, and New Zealand are on the higher levels of accessibility. So this really shows that there is a lot of work that has to be done in promoting more multimodal public transport systems to enhance access to opportunities for everyone. The framework that we are using as UN Habitat is the Avoid, Shift, and Improve framework. Some of you might have heard it. We would be starting by looking at strategies and measures as part of the Avoid paradigm in terms of reducing the need for motorized travel. And that would really look at city planning, more compact, more mixed use development patterns that would help to reduce the need for motorized travel. From there, we would be supporting cities in their shift to more environmentally friendly modes, and that would really mean the promotion of urban public transport systems integrated with walking and cycling, on-demand services, new mobility services, and so on. Lastly, we would be assisting cities in improving the energy efficiency of the transport modes, and that would look at improvements to the fuel economy, but also, for example, the introduction of electric mobility powered by renewable energy sources. I wanted to share a few high-level recommendations. First and foremost, I would like to emphasize that we have to prioritize walkable streets through mixed use and more compact urban planning. On the images, you can see one of our pilot projects from Kenya, where we supported a city in creating a pedestrian zone that was very successful in attracting additional people to walk, and also creating this very livable space with less pollution, less road accidents, and so on. We need to focus on the implementation of complete streets that cater for everyone. That would mean that sufficient space is given to public transport systems, as well as also to pedestrians and to cyclists, and really finding kind of this equal distribution of the road space. The example here that you can see is from Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, where we have assisted the city in the implementation of a BRT, of a bus rapid transit system. We also have to design for efficiency. Space is very limited on many of the streets that we're working with. So it's really about looking for opportunities looking for transport modes that would be using the space most efficiently. And that really puts a big focus on public transport systems, as you can see, that have a much higher carrying capacity in terms of people per direction as compared to, for example, mixed traffic infrastructure for only cars. And the decision in each city really needs to be based on the transport demand, on the existing right of way. So there's no right or wrong solution, but I think the focus on public transport becomes very evident looking at this graphic here. We also have to shift our mindset and need to strengthen public transport as the backbone of all mobility services. I think that's really kind of a shift in the way that we have to think about our cities and really put a lot of emphasis on this idea of multimodal transport that puts public transport in the center, integrated with walking, cycling, on-demand services, new mobility modes, and so on. And then also, again, look at how to redistribute the street space accordingly. We need to guarantee financial incentives and a policy and regulatory framework for sustainable mobility. And that, for example, would mean that governments would need to invest more and more into public transport systems, the operations, the infrastructure, the maintenance of them, or also provide incentives, for example, for the shift to electrification. We need to establish institutional frameworks with fully fledged institutions. That is very important, especially when we look at mobility from a metropolitan perspective. We have to work together as partners, and certain institutions need to be set up that are really bringing together the partners and be coordinating this multimodality of the public transport systems in the metropolitan context of cities. We also need to encourage an accelerated uptake of innovation and additional investments in clean technologies. Here you can actually see an example from Kochi in India, where we have supported with the introduction of electric auto rickshaws. And the business model behind that was very interesting, where UN Habitat kind of catered for the additional funding as compared to conventional auto rickshaws. So it was kind of a very interesting business model behind that project. We also have to focus on another sector, which is the energy sector, and really try to promote the shift towards renewable energy, because only then electrification makes sense if the energy that is pulled into is actually clean. And lastly, we are also big promoters of facilitating greater collaboration of stakeholder groups. We recently established what is called the Urban Living Lab Center that co-develops and co-designs and co-implements solutions between cities, civil society, academia, businesses, and so on. So really kind of within a city context, really bringing together those partners to co-develop solutions. My last few slides will be rather visual. I think I'm maybe concluding by saying we have to stop building cities for cars. We have to stop building roads, because we're only adding traffic jams, pollutions, and road deaths into our city setting, and instead have to focus on designing and planning cities for people. We have to add public transit, we have to add density, we have to cut parking to be able to ensure a better quality of life for everyone. I have added a few further resources if you're interested in UN Habitat's approach to mobility. And feel free to click on our website and look for some of those publications. With that, I'll be handing over to Yuki, as mentioned, who will be taking us through this concept of transit-oriented development, which we are a big promoter of, and which kind of links the urban planning with the transport planning aspects. And we felt this might be very interesting for the students that are listening today. And with that, over to Yuki. Thank you.
Okay. Can you hear my voice?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes. And can you see my screen now?
I think it's loading, Yuki.
It's not okay. Now it came. Yeah.
Okay.
So make it full screen.
Okay. Okay, can you see my screen in full screen now?
Yeah. Yes.
Great. So it's a pleasure for me to be presenting this introductory presentation on transit-oriented development, TOD. And I will be touching upon a broad range of topics. Firstly, I am going to talk about why transit-oriented development is important by touching upon the benefits of TOD and also what are the important principles of TOD, and then a special case of TOD planning and the various stakeholders with regards to TOD and how to implement the TOD by introducing it to some instruments that are used to promote TOD. And this is something what Steffi has already talked about, but I will reiterate again. So public transportation investment and urban development is really closely related, and today these two could synergize, create synergy with each other. So, for example, development of public transportation system would lead to increase of residences, offices, and commercial facilities around the area, which would create more demand for more transportation service and enhanced level of urban activities, which would lead to reinvestment for city services and local amenity and variety of transportation need for the future for the people, which would generate momentum for building up the city and creating better accessibility for all people and variety of transportation modes. But on the other hand, lack of public transportation investment would lead to urban sprawl. For example, focus too much on the construction of roads and highways would lead to the houses or built environment spreading to outer cities, which would lead to low density development and low level of urban activity at the city center. And this stretched urban form would lead to costly infrastructure maintenance, and it would create an unwanted situation for transportation, such as traffic congestion in the city, and also increased demand for car parks at the city center. So this is just to illustrate the evidence of transportation and urban development relations. This is a nightlight image of Tokyo metropolitan area, which is the city where I came from. And this nightlight is a good indicator of economic activities and human footprint. And Tokyo metropolitan areas is well known for its way of building the city around its public transportation, mostly railways. And these dots that you can see are nodes. These are all correspond to location of the railway stations. So you can see that Tokyo is built closely around the railway stations. And so what is transit-oriented development? It is defined as a planning and design approach that focuses on promoting urban development that is compact, mixed use, pedestrian and bicycle friendly around public transportation hubs, such as bus or train stations. So this approach is based on the premise that economic growth, urban transportation, and land use can be managed more efficiently if they are planned together. The goal is to reduce the dependence on public cars and promote the usage of sustainable modes of transport such as walking, cycling, and public transportation. So this slide shows the expected benefits of TOD. There are multiple benefits. So higher densities and concentration of business and services would lead to improving economic productivity and boost cities' competitiveness, while also improving access to services and enhancing employment opportunities for all citizens. And also promoting the use of public transportation and non-motorized transportation and shift from private transport would lead to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and mitigate the negative impacts of climate change. And also, it would provide high quality public areas and shorter commuting time. And another thing is urban design with priority on pedestrian and cycling, and also with streamlined transportation management and organized road traffic would eventually lead to improving public health and promoting well-being for the residents, and also for fewer road accidents, fewer injuries, and fewer fatalities. So when we talk about TOD, there are three principal dimensions that we often talk about, which is one, density, two, the diversity, and three, the design. When we talk about density, it's high density, it's compact, and diversity meaning a mixed land use, and design meaning pedestrian and they reduce vehicle trips and reduce vehicle mile traveled per capita and encourage non-motorized travel. So talking about the first D, density, TOD promotes mixed use developments that includes the variety of land uses such as residential, commercial, and institutional. Are you still with us? Me?
Yeah, we are able to hear you.
Okay, sorry. So the third D is the design, which is that TOD prioritizes pedestrian and cyclist-friendly design that promotes safe and convenient access to public transportation. And this includes features such as wide sidewalks, bike lanes, and well-designed transit stations that are easily accessible and provide a pleasant experience for the users. And for coming back to the first D, the density, how do we control the density? I think we are familiar with this, but I'm going to introduce you to some three indices for controlling density, which are floor area ratio, FAR, and building coverage ratio, BCR, and green area ratio, GAR. So for FAR is the total floor area divided by site area, which regulates the density of the city or encourages the efficient land use. And BCR is the building area divided by site area, and it ensures enough space for other uses such as public spaces and access to paths. And green area ratio, there are lots of ways that city apply to calculate this, but they are often combined with BCR to ensure there is enough green space in the city. And so the second D, diversity, the key word is mixed use development. There are three elements for mixed use. One is blending multiple uses such as residential, retail, entertainment, office, hotel, and public. And the second one is to physically and functionally integrating those uses. And three, and most importantly, creating walkable community with good pedestrian connections. We often oversee or forget about this three. It is really important to have this, as well as having a mixed usage of land. It is really important to have it in a very close proximity in a human scale. So there are two ways you can do mixed use. One is the vertical, where you can have the lower floors as retail shops and then the upper floor as our residential use. Or you can have horizontal mixed use, which provides for a variety of complementary and integrated use that are walkable within a neighborhood. So I'm going to talk about some examples of Bangkok. They, in a way, they are. I want to talk about how they zone and create the zoning and density regulation. And in Bangkok, land use is typically grouped into 10 categories, 10 colors. You can see them here. And development and activities are permitted or regulated accordingly. The development size or the bulk control is done with using 5 parameters, which are floor area ratio, open space ratio, minimum and maximum lot size, and maximum heights, and building setbacks. So if we take an example for low density residential zone, which is colored in yellow, typically the FAR for this kind of land use is up to 250%, while the open space ratio has to be over 12.5%. And on the other hand, high density residential area, which is shown in brown colors, the FAR can go up to 600%, whereas the open space ratio has to be above 5%. And Bangkok, they have provisions to promote TOD by zoning, and there are specific land use codes that are assigned for areas adjacent to public transportation to promote TOD. So in a regular brown, meaning high density residence, FAR is up to 600%, but where it is adjacent to public transportation, it can go up to 700%. So the difference is 100%. So in addition, there is a deregulation for maximum allowed plot size for areas within 500 meters of the station. So this is how Bangkok, metropolitan area of Bangkok, is trying to give incentives for the developers to densify the areas around public transportation. And also, there is incentives for preferred pattern of developments. So as an incentive for developers, if they clear one of the 5 criteria, such as provision of affordable housing, provision of parking spaces, provision of public space or parks, or water storage facility, or if it's certified as energy saving building, they can get bonus 20% for FAR. So this is an incentive that they introduce to partly promote TOD as well. So, and going back to the third D, designing for walkable and cycling area, at the neighborhood level, it is important that the plots are designed in human scale and to ensure network of walking and cycling routes. So the city blocks should be less than 1 hectare or less, with the longest dimension no more than 150 meters. And it's good to break up large blocks to create a walkable neighborhood. I'm going to illustrate with giving you, introducing you some of a case, which is Barcelona. And Barcelona adopts this kind of a grid style city, grid system in which, and also they plan to formulate a network of green streets and green squares inside this so-called superblock, which typically consists of small roads and streets for pedestrians and cyclists, and cars and vans and scooters are not allowed to enter these areas, and they have to go on the perimeters of the outer roads. So they have done some piloting for some of the blocks, and they are in the process of expanding it to the whole city. And another example is the case of Ahmedabad CBD. The CBD used to have unfriendly for pedestrians and well, a street unfriendly for pedestrian because the blocks were quite large. And in the process of development, they have proposed a revision of the development plan and dividing the land plot into smaller size and providing walkable, pedestrian-friendly neighborhood, and reducing the average block perimeters from 700 meters to 400 meters with intersections at every 100 or 150 meters. So, and for designing for accessible streets, and the street level, it is important that the infrastructures and street furnitures provide comfortable and easy universal access to public transportation. I'm going to introduce you to a case in Dar es Salaam, which they did a quite good job when they built the BRT system. They carved the lamps on sidewalks and station platforms so that it's easy to access all, even for people in wheelchair. And also they made a elevated pedestrian crossing at every station so that the cars would have to slow down when they reach when they enter this station area. So I'm going to talk about this spatial scale of TOD planning. TOD spatial planning ranges from macro scale to micro scale. First of all, at the macro scale, there's a city level, which involves integration of land uses with transit system and to decide where is the lowest center and where is not as protected area. And then there is the corridor level plan, which ensures that development at one station complements the development at other stations, and resulting in a connected network of transit-oriented places. And there is the station area level, which encompasses distance within a 5 to 10 minute walk distance to ensure safe access to station for all users. And there is the micro scale, which is the neighborhood or plot size level, focusing on individual developments within a station area. So going back to the case of Ahmedabad, they have the city plan, which defines where is the growth centers, where is the urban axis, and there's a strategy to integrate land use and transportation system. And there is this corridor level plan, which forms the transit-oriented zone. They call it TOZ, and defining the development patterns along the corridor based on the characteristics of each area. And there's the neighborhood plan made by the neighborhoods that establish the development pattern for each land plots. And it is really important that these plans are consistent and doesn't contradict to each other. And let's think about the stakeholders of TOD. Looking at this picture, let's think about the stakeholders that are involved in TOD. Maybe if you can think about it, there are lots of stakeholders involved just by looking at this one picture. There is the transit operators owning the buses and stations, and also the road infrastructures are often developed by local and or national government. In the Tanzania case, it is very complex because there's two national governments in charge of the road development, and there's municipal laws which are developed by the local municipalities. And along the corridor, there's business owners and developers, and also, of course, there's users and residents. So this shows the multiple stakeholders. There are 6 groups: local governments, which are responsible for land use planning and transportation infrastructure planning or development. And also there is, of course, the transit agency, which performs the transit services. And there's the developers that play a key role in designing and building buildings along the corridors. And there's the business owners that benefit from increased traffic around the corridor. And there are community groups and residents, which are typically involved in the process and to give valuable feedback to the design and implementation. And also there's non-governmental organizations that play, and universities as well, that play a key role in supporting TOD initiatives by providing technical assistance and advocating for policy change or conducting research and analysis to inform decision making. So how do these stakeholders collaborate with each other? In an ideal situation, the stakeholders can mutually co-benefit from TOD and create synergy for sustained urban growth. And if we look at the transit agency first, so they invest on transit infrastructures to improve or to expand the transit services, which would create better service, better access, and create more to generate, increase the users of their transit system, which would lead to increase of revenues for the transit agency, which they could use to reinvest on transit infrastructure and services. And then on the other side, there is the business owners and developers, which could benefit from increased business opportunities around the transit area to create businesses, shops, residences that would be located closer to transit services, which would in turn lead to increased revenue for businesses and increased land value for developers. And for the local governments, the increased revenue for transit services and also increased revenue of businesses and land value would lead to increased revenue for the city, which in turn they could use for provision of public services for the citizens. So this is the ideal situation. So the question we might be asking is how to sustain this positive cycle of transportation improvement and urban development. Specifically, how can the economic benefits of TOD be captured, and how can the stakeholders be motivated to reinvest, leveraging on the economic benefits, and how can the economic benefits be equitably shared among stakeholders. So one solution I'm going to present here is land value capture, which is a method to create and capture the benefits of higher land values around urban transit stations and corridors. It is a public financing method to appropriate land value increase that is generated by public interventions or infrastructure development for local investments to produce public good. By public interventions, I mean such as change of land use or delegation of development activities or provision of FAR bonuses. And by infrastructure investments, I refer to transit infrastructure development or improvement of transit services or creation of public spaces. So land value can increase due to population and economic growth, or public interventions or investment, or landowners' investment. But it is these two, population growth and economic growth, and also public interventions and investments should should be retained by the public to be reinvested for the public good. So there are two types of land value capture instruments, which is tax or fee-based instruments and the development-based instrument. I would pick some of them just to illustrate what they are about. So as tax or fee-based instruments, I'm going to introduce tax increment financing, TIF, which is mainly used in the US to finance TOD projects. TIF is finance mechanism used by local governments to fund public infrastructure projects, including TOD projects. So TIF works by capturing the increase of property tax revenue generated by a specific area, or district of a new development project, and the additional value, additional revenue is then used to fund public infrastructure improvements and other development initiatives in the area. Typically, this fund is either captured annually based on the increment of asset value, or it can be retained upfront upon municipality issuing the bond based on the future property value increase. So the good thing about TIF is that it is used in US cities to finance capital-intensive projects as well. And it fits the beneficiary pays principle, which is the principle that the person who benefits pays the price for that. But it has to be, there is a concern that TIF may lead to displacement of low-income residents and businesses, as the new development can lead to higher property values and rents. And to do this, to implement TIF, the real estate market needs to be mature and to be responsive to the intervention, and also authority also needs to be capable of assessing the future value of the property. And the second tax fee-based instrument I'm going to introduce you is the Business Improvement District, BID scheme. So BIDs are typically geographically defined areas in which businesses collaborate to fund improvements or maintenance or promotion of the commercial district. BID focuses on enhancing the attractiveness and vitality of the district, and also improving pedestrian and transit access. So in a typical setting, property owners of the BID pays BID fees, which could be used to improve improvement measures such as conducting street events or doing promotions, and also infrastructure interventions such as improving streets or providing mobility services such as minibuses in the area or bicycle share services. So this BID can foster participatory process in the local planning, and also it may be effective in responding to individual local needs. But BID may not work well when districts where there are not so much appetite for businesses, and BID is suited for business management and improvements, but not maybe suited for capital-intensive projects such as building a station or developing transit infrastructures. And an example of development-based instrument is the land readjustment schemes, which is typically used in Japanese cities, and also I think, as far as I understand, India has a similar scheme as well. So this is you might know that this is a process by which a group of landowners pool their land to exchange it with the government or a third party, and who then redivise and configures the land to create new parcels with more desirable shapes or sizes and locations. And in TOD, land adjustment schemes can be used to configure land use patterns around transit stations, creating mixed land uses that are compatible with transit and promote walking, cycling, and other forms of sustainable mobility. So this can generate direct revenue from incremental land values and that increases the attributed to transit. But they may face challenges such as property right issues or public participation or legal procedures, and they often require a long process for consensus building in the neighborhood. There are researches that are conducted to identify the successful factors of TOD. And this research I'm going to introduce identified 16 key success factors for implementing TOD, which are grouped in as three groups: policy and strategy, organization and stakeholders, and implementation and technical capacity. So for policy strategy, it stresses that the vision or commitment from the government, the political stability is the key for successful TOD. And for organization and stakeholders, collaboration with all the actors and also municipal collaboration, and also public participation and acceptance is the key, wherein implementation and technical capacity, it is good to have site-specific planning tools such as FAR bonuses or selling of air rights, and also to have certainty for developers so that they are certain that their development would lead to profit for them. And this is just a reference for the TOD performance for various cities. And for there are lots of challenges regarding implementation of TOD. And because implementing TOD requires a long-term and holistic approach that integrate land use, transportation, and community development goals. One of the key challenges is the coordination and collaboration, because TOD involves lots of coordination and collaboration among multiple stakeholders. So for this, it is important that the establishment of a coordination mechanism which facilitates the communication among stakeholders and decision makers. And secondly, second challenge is that the public support, because implementing TOD may require significant changes to the built environment, which may be controversial. So for this, it is important to ensure public participation in the planning and implementation process, and ensure that equity is achieved benefiting all residents. And for financing, it is a challenge because implementing TOD can be expensive, and it is especially true for developing cities. And for this, it is important to assess financing and development tools considering the financial capacity of the city and its regulatory framework. And fourth challenge is long-term commitment, because TOD process is a long-term. So it is important to embed TOD into the city strategy and planning framework to ensure consistency and continuity. My last slide is about UN Habitat support for TOD. So UN Habitat can leverage knowledge, experience, and network to provide technical, public, and financial support for the whole process of TOD, from assessing and diagnosing, enabling environment, planning, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation. So yeah, so this is all for myself.
Thank you, Yuki. Thank you, Yuki, for your insightful presentation on TOD, and also Stephanie for the multimodality in metro city challenges you talked about. Now, the question answer session will happen after the third speaker's session. So, I would now like to invite our third speaker, Valiyappan sir, Assistant Professor from Department of Planning, the School of Planning and Architecture, Vijayawada. He has 21 years of experience, including teaching and industry. His post-graduation was in housing. He is involved in preparation of city master plans and zonal development plans of Dwarka sub-city and Nazafgarh area. Apart from this, he also contributed in preparation of Delhi Master Plan 2021. His research domain is on accessibility indices and a smart decision support system tool for measuring access of mobility impaired in public spaces. He has also been involved in some housing activities in the organized sector. He contributed the report articulation on the chapter title Land Policy as Underpin for Housing, and he also worked upon the cooperative housing in employment generation and poverty alleviation project. Now I would like to call Valiyappan sir.
Yes, thank you, ma'am.
Welcome, sir. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm able to see the screen, ma'am. Can you- Hello. And screen is visible?
Yes, sir. It is visible. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Today I'm going to speak on the topic mobility and transport for sustainable development, mostly towards Indian perspective. Like mostly, I will talk about in Indian context how the sustainability is in that, and then what are the policies, measures of the government in implementing the sustainable mobility in Indian context. This is my structure of presentation. Introduction, travel pattern and travel trends in India, need for sustainable development, sustainable development over the years at world level, transport governance in India, sustainable development over the years in India, transport policy over the years in India, sustainable transport measures in various cities of India, sustainable transport projects which are undertaken in Indian context, what are the emission norms and alternate fuels which are existing in Indian context, and then research studies which are very pertinent to transportation aspects in Indian context and the way forward. Uh, this is at the world level. This is the context. Like if you see this, the foremost consumer of fossil fuel is transport. 26% of the carbon emissions by transportation sector, 19% of the transportation share of total world energy demand. In number of vehicles is going to be double in 2 decades. This is a scenario, and then 50% of the air pollution is caused by road transport. So that is the significance of mobility at the world level. If you see city profiles and travel patterns in India, we have according to census 2011, we have 4,378 urban agglomerations and towns. 50% of the population live in small cities in India. It is 0.5 million population, less than 0.5 million population. 5 million population lives in small cities. 15% of the population lives in mega cities, more than 8 million population. Indian cities have a character of mixed land uses, mostly if you see, and then 15 to 60% of the people are living in slums. You see the travel pattern. If you see in big cities like Mumbai and Hyderabad, 80% of the trips are less than 10 kilometer length. Cities like Mumbai, Hyderabad, Delhi, Pune, Um, the slum people cannot even afford motorized public transport and hence primarily dependent on NMT, non-motorized transport, primarily using cycles and bicycles and walking for even for longer distances. Shorter trip lengths and high percentage of low-income groups have resulted in high modal share of NMT in Indian context. Longer trips are dependent on bus systems and cities where formal organized bus service is not available. Mostly people are dependent on two-wheelers, intermediate public transportation systems, and cycle rickshaws dominate the modal share in Indian context. If you see the travel trends in mega cities, more than 8 lakh population, 30% of the trips are NMT based, 50% of the trips are PT based for public transport based, where formal and informal bus transportation. 20% are trips are personal vehicle based. This 20% of the trips are personal vehicle based. It creates a lot of it creates negative environmental impacts like degrading air quality, noise, habitat loss, and fragmentation. Mostly, if you see in Indian cities, we see public transport and NMT or captive uses. Mostly, they are attached to that. And then slowly, these people are shifting towards two-wheelers and cars because of the crowded conditions. And then we are having very poor NMT infrastructure conditions in Indian cities. So people are slowly moving towards the motorized two-wheelers or cars. So mostly people who are using NMT modes like bicycle and walk are slowly shifting to IPT modes like intermediate public transport and public transport modes. So there is a need for sustainable transportation in Indian context. If you see because of the trips which are associated with non-motorized transport. Um, so we will try to understand what is sustainable development in the general sense. Sustainable development means development that meets the needs of present generation, which are fulfilled without compromising the needs of future generation to meet their own needs. This is by World Commission for Environment and Development from Brundtland Commission report 1987. European Conference of Ministers of OECD 2004 also says what a sustainable transport system means. To meet the basic needs of transport system by individuals and society, and then the sustainable transport system has to be affordable, operate efficiently, offers choice of transport modes, and supports growing economy. Even the other speakers also stressed regarding the choice of transport modes in the sustainable mobility. And then it has to limit the emissions and waste. It has to minimize consumption of non-renewable resources. It has to limit consumption of renewable resources to a sustainable level. It has to minimize the use of land and reduces noise. If you see sustainable transportation, focusing on transportation aspects, sustainable transportation refers to the broad subject of transport that is sustainable in the sense of social, environmental, and climate impacts. The components for evaluating sustainability includes the source of energy, technology employed, and the infrastructure used to accommodate the transport. These three things are very important: low carbon growth, and then climate resilient growth, and providing better access and mobility for the disadvantaged. So avoid ecologically sensitive impact of transportation by ensuring lower emission from direct and indirect process, reduce average emission factor per ton kilometer. And then the next is sustainable transportation, climate resilient growth. Build transport system immune to effects of climate change. Climate proofing transport infrastructure has to be created, considering the vulnerabilities. Access and mobility. Sustainable transportation is a measure to understand the impact of various. It's a measurement to understand the impact of various transportation system in order to be able to target environmentally challenging process and replace them with more advanced systems and determine the efficiency of new systems. Sustainable transportation is about the changes. It is about thinking of the end, focus, and means of transportation planning, encompassing drastic changes in city models and urban planning. Focus has to be primarily on the urban centers as scope of reduction is more than rural places. So we have to focus more on urban areas than the rural areas related to sustainable aspect and sustainable movement. A part of sustainable development involves concerns about environmental quality. It talks about social equity, providing uh, equal accessibility to the disadvantaged, economic vitality, and global climate change. It has to be sustainable development. Transportation has to look beyond the transportation also. It requires vertical and horizontal integration of functions that interact with the transportation, such as sustainable production and disposal, and is not a standalone practice in itself. So it requires framework which move forward the urban ecosystem.
Hello. Hello.
We can hear you, Dr. Rao.
Yeah, I think Valiappan sir lost network.
Yes,
Valiappan sir?
yes, I'm trying.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. Yeah.
I'm able
Yes.
to see the presentation.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, sir. It's visible.
Yes. So the pillars, shall I start with this? Pillars of sustainable transportation.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So it talks about three aspects. One is environmental aspect, the other one is a social, the other one is an economic aspect. In environmental aspect, it talks about how to use the land effectively so that so we can protect the integrity of ecosystems. And then we have to use sparingly the energy resources that are essentially not renewable to control air quality and climate change. So we have to use other resources that are renewable or inexhaustible, achieved in part through the reuse of items and recycling of material used in vehicles and infrastructure. So they talk about recycling aspects, they talk about the integrity of ecosystem by using the effective use of land. In social aspect, should be based on social justice, should not discriminate between humans and between generations, accepting the vulnerable groups into the mobility, allow and support development at a human scale, and provide for reasonable choice of transport mode, type of housing, and community and living styles. So you have to produce less noise that is acceptable to be the by the communities when you are having mobility. Be safe for people and their property. Social aspects, economic aspects. You have to distribute the cost and benefits that you have to equally distribute to the various state of the society, and then it has to be cost-effective service, and it has to have the capacity also. Be financially affordable. Each generation has to afford the sustainable transportation. It supports vibrant, sustainable economic activity. So these are the pillars of sustainable transportation. These are the strategies for sustainable transportation by Lippmann, published in Journal of Transport Geography. It talks about three aspects. One is demand management and the vehicle and fuel technology changes and road and operation improvement. In demand management, he is talking about walking, biking, railways, and then he's talking about discouraging measures like tax and fee. For example, in parking areas, how to discourage parking, and then so that people doesn't buy cars, more cars. So taxing them. So all these aspects goes into the demand management, how to discourage the people in having in having the mobility of their own. And then mixed land use and compact usage comes as part of demand management. Vehicle and fuel technology, like we have to look for what are the new types of fuel that have less emissions, or we have to plan for future net zero emissions, and then new vehicle technologies, and then we have to boost our efficiency related to vehicle and fuel technology changes. Road and operation improvement, we have to understand what are the traffic flow changes, what are the intelligent transport systems, passenger transport information system, what is available, how to have the driver's education, all this which are related to the roads and operation improvement. These are the strategies. These are the strategies for sustainable development looked at three angles. These are the 10 principles of sustainable urban transport. One is like planning dense and human scale cities, developing transit oriented cities, optimizing the road network and its use, implementing transit improvements, providing bus stops with better accessibilities, controlling vehicle use, encouraging more of walking and cycling environment, and then managing parking, promoting clean vehicles, um, and then communicating solutions, and then we have to approach the challenges comprehensively. So these are the 10 principles of sustainable urban development. New inroads into sustainable transportation. these are the we have to look for net zero carbon fuel. That this is going to be the future, enabling production of new fuels from sunlight and carbon via scientific research to reduce fossil fuel dependency. Because most of the fuels now most of the fuels are for carbon, so we have to look for which is net zero carbon fuel, and then we have to look for technology that we can have hybrid cars, solar energy, um, those type of technology, and then deep carbonization. This aim to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by certain stipulated amount and reduce the emission factor of various activity related. So there are some barriers in achieving this, like lack of awareness, perception of high cost involved, lack of adequate mechanism and framework. Now we are having high dependency on fossil fuels. Over the years, if you see at the world level, these are the sustainable development perspectives have emerged. In 1992, that the role of transport in sustainable development was first recognized at the 1992 United Nations Earth Summit and reinforced in its outcome document. In Agenda 21, the first time in 1992, they recognized the role of transport in sustainable development. Several chapters, like chapter number 9 and chapter number 7, focused on human settlements and recognized transport as a key development issue. And in 1997, in the 5-year review of Agenda 21, UN placed special emphasis on transportation and created various anchor points for development of sustainable transportation. In 2002, in Johannesburg, Plan of Implementation also captures role of transport and lies down for its participatory country for an efficient mobility policy. In 2012, in the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development, also they focused on mobility are central to sustainable development, and they emphasized the role of municipal government in setting a vision for sustainable cities. So they stressed the role of municipal government in this particular conference. In 2014, Secretary General established high-level advisory group on sustainable transport to develop concrete recommendations for more sustainable transport system. In 2015, there were sustainable development goals were there, but this is one of the important things, that in the sustainable development goals, the transport, the sustainability, mobility as a goal is not mentioned. Transport sector itself is not mentioned as part of one of the sustainable development. So there is a gap in the sustainable development goals in addressing the transport, but in other goals they have addressed it indirectly. Transport governance in India. If you see Constitution of India, like we have to understand in Indian Constitution how the Indian Constitution works, transportation. In Indian Constitution, if you see, there are varied subjects are there. One is a central act, and the other one there are central subjects are there, state subjects are there, concurrent subjects are there. In any of the subjects, they have not addressed the transport as one of the subjects. So what they did is, like, the central government through their various ministries, what they did is, like, they were trying to monitor the interstate impact related to railways, ports, airways, national highways, and waterways. Through their various ministries, they were able to govern these systems. In state government, through intracity or interstate, the state government takes care of this responsibility. Until 1996, what the Ministry of Railways were looking the metro rail, and Ministry of Surface Transport, where the two ministries were looking into the road aspect as well as the rail aspect. But later they understood there is a need for integrated transport planning of transport services in a city to dovetail transport planning with another aspect. So they they brought under the Ministry of Urban Development and Transportation, that Ministry of Railways. They were looking the metro rail. Now the Ministry of Urban Development takes care of that particular department. So if you see the central governance as well as the state governance, these are the various departments. If you see at the central level, there is a Ministry of Road Transport, which looks into the motor vehicles, vehicle specification and emission standards. Ministry of Environment and Forest looks into the emission standards and oversee the Environmental Protection Act. Ministry of Urban Development looks into policy planning and coordination of urban transport. There are three ministries which are involved, very important. One is Ministry of Road Transport, Ministry of Environment and Forest, and then Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, which regulates the fuel standards, and Ministry of Industries regulate the automobile manufacturing sector. So there are four ministries which are looking into various aspects related to the transportation sector, not one ministry. In state governance, Department of Transport under the state looks into the issue of driving license, pollution under control certificates, vehicle registration. State Transport Undertaking looks into the operation and management of the public transport services. Department of Environment regulates air quality. Local municipality as well as the Public Works Department looks into the construction and maintenance of road infrastructure, non-motorized vehicles, and all those aspects. City Development Authority looks into the land use and land allocation. State Police enforces the road safety laws and enforcement. Land Revenue Administration looks into the land acquisition and allocation. So there are various departments at the central and state level who look into the governance aspect related to transport. Steps taken by Indian government. For, they have finalized and issued the National Urban Transport Policy, which came in 2006, and they initiated demonstration project with Global Environment Facility. So a lot of projects related to non-motorized transport were able to get implemented with the help of Global Environment Facility. This is a unique partnership of 18 agencies, this particular Global Environment Facility. It's including United Nations agencies as well as multilateral agencies, as well as NGOs, which are part of this Global Environment Facility to address the most challenging environmental issues. So our government is also having partnership with this Global Environment Facility to implement NMT projects, strengthening the institutional setup, and then created an ambitious capacity building program after the NUTP in the bus sector. Support to improve both road and rail-based MRT facilities, and then they're making emission norms increasingly stringent and improving the quality of fuels.
Ma'am, I think he took a little break. I'm just speaking to him. Hello? Hello? Yeah. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, yes, you are audible.
But I think Valiappan sir lost.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm audible, ma'am, now?
Yes, you are audible. Yeah.
And then these are the capacity development programs, and then they started with MRT and NMT programs also. MRT systems are the backbone of the city's PT systems and essential feature of sustainable transport. So they looked about the aspects which are very poor related to MRT and NMT in Indian cities, and then they addressed that. And then making emission norms increasingly stringent and improving the quality, that was also undertaken as part of the steps by Indian government. Over the policies, like over the years, these are the policies in India. National Urban Transport Policies, it is about, this is a very important policy which talks about the sustainable development. It talks about keeping the people on the front, focus on moving people, not vehicles, to provide seamless connectivity to metro regions, guidelines to create multimodal and sustainable urban transport system. And then it talks about various aspects like integrating the land use and transport planning. And then it talks about equitable allocation of road space. And then it talks about priority to use of public transport and role of paratransit. So the national transport policy addresses many aspects related to the non-motorized transport. In 2006, Jawaharlal Nehru Mission also addresses several schemes. One important thing is like they have introduced this BRTS, bus rapid transit systems in Ahmedabad and various other regions, and light rail projects under the mass rapid transport schemes for the and the upgradation of city bus systems in big towns and smaller cities. And then again, there was an NUTP amendment, National Urban Transport Policy of India in 2014. Also, they have amended and included the integrated land use and transport planning, creation of comprehensive mobility plans and public transport and NMT plans, and provided guidelines to create multimodal sustainable urban transport systems. In 2015, Atal Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Transformation looked in the similar perspective like JNNURM, and then they looked into the NMTs also by creating footpaths on walkways, sidewalks, foot over bridges, and cycling facilities. In 2015, Smart City Mission came into existence. Providing impetus to walkable communities is one of the focus area. It promotes transit-oriented development, public transport, and last-mile para-transport connectivity. It furthers a technological upgradation in urban transport through intelligent traffic monitoring systems. And in 2017, very important policy, National Transit-Oriented Development. It talks about to enable the transformation, people have to shift from the two-wheelers and cars to the public transportation, and then accessible public transport. And it talks about compact walkable communities. And then in 2020, another one important milestone, National Electric Mobility Mission Plan. It was the goal to encourage the faster adoption of electric and hybrid vehicles in the country through government-industry collaborations, to allow India to emerge as a leader in EV manufacturing by 2020. These are all some sustainable transport project in India. Kochi. In Kochi, has won the award for the city with the most sustainable transport system. They have introduced in Kochi Metro, Kochi Water Metro, they have introduced, and then the Kochi Open Mobility Network was which digitized and integrated various transport facilities, and then they introduced more than 100 low-floor buses for easy accessibility of the vulnerable users. If you see Surat, Surat also implemented very important measures. One is like they have integrated the land use and transport. The other one is like they have bagged the award for attracting 87% of vehicle and auto rickshaw users to buses. So they have shifted the people from vehicle and auto rickshaw to the buses, and then integrated transit system comprising of BRT, regular urban bus, regional bus, and regional ride are envisaged to deliver the feeder services to meet the people with the needs of people of Surat. Delhi. Delhi is also one of the cities for the best non-motorized transport system for the Chandni Chowk redevelopment project. This is a street improvement of Chandni Chowk, creating pedestrian friendly environment with the distinctive character of Chandni Chowk, integrated plan of all services. The redevelopment of Chandni Chowk includes planning of 2 lanes. You can see 2 lanes in the picture. For smooth movement of non-motorized vehicles, with the public amenities such as toilets, they have kept in the median, and the seating along the roads with plantation and development of town of Chowk as a pedestrian plaza. because when you, at the end of this Chandni Chowk, there is a town hall plaza. There is a town hall, so that chowk is created as a pedestrian plaza. In Nagpur, they have introduced a technology, geospatial and 5D BIM technology, and then they have completed the project within the time. So for that, they have completed this Maha Metro with a tightly controlled quality, cost, and time. So Metro was also credited for working on issues like traffic congestion and road accidents in city and provide citizens with an easy and affordable daily commute. So we will look into some sustainable development projects in India related to e-mobility, non-motorized transport project in Visakhapatnam, and mass rapid transportation system by the Indian government. Electric mobility in India, why? 14% of the 14 out of the 15 most polluted cities of the world are in India. 36% of nitrogen oxide emissions in Delhi were due to vehicles in 2016. 25% of the particulate matter 2.5 emissions in Delhi were due to vehicles in 2016. So these are the potential gains of using EV. You can get better air quality, improving the public health in cities, and then greenhouse gas mitigation. You can lessen the greenhouse gas emissions towards greener India. Promotes renewables through EV batteries and battery swapping. Enhances energy security, reduces imported fuel use in transport sector, increases plant load factor, increases efficiency of power plants, technological leadership. All this is possible. If you see the Indian scenario related to electric vehicle infrastructure is still in nascent stages, with a limited number of charging stations and supporting infrastructure in place. This is the stats of 2021. 1,600 public EV charging stations are there in the country, which are majorly located in metropolitan cities like Delhi, Mumbai, and Bengaluru. These are the major challenges and barriers for EV infrastructure in India: lack of charging infrastructure, high cost of electric vehicles, range anxiety, because whether now we got 300 kilometer range, but the range anxiety is there with the people. Lack of awareness and education related to EV. Limited availability of the models, of EV models, electric vehicle, 2-wheelers or 3-wheelers, or maybe 4-wheelers. Policy framework is also in place, but not very supportive. Dependence on imported components. Most of the components related to the infrastructure are imported. Automobile components. Infrastructural compatibility. These are the very challenges of EV infrastructure in India. Government initiatives and policies aimed at promoting electric vehicles adoption in India. There was a scheme that is called FAME. This is called Faster Adoption and Manufacturing of Electric Vehicles in India. It was launched in 2015 to promote the adoption of electric vehicles in the country. And National Electric Mobility Mission Plan. It was launched in 2013 with the aim of promoting electric mobility in India. And then there was a GST reduction was also there from 12 to 5% to make the electric vehicles accessible and affordable for consumers. And then EV charging infrastructure guidelines were issued by Power Ministry in 2018. These guidelines provide a framework for the installation of EV charging stations across the country. Apart from that, in this infrastructure guidelines, they give concessions and subsidies to the installations. State level policies. Several states in India have launched their own policy to promote electric vehicle adoptions. And then green energy corridor was also promoted as part of this initiative. This is the scenario of EV vehicles as per Automobile Component Manufacturer Association of India. EV sales in India have increased by 25% in the first quarter of 2021 compared to the same previous year. But they are also addressing there is a lack of charging infrastructure in Indian context. And then need for local production, because most of the components related to electric vehicle are imported. So they need for local production of this to bring down the cost. Government support is key in providing subsidies and policies that encourage the adoption of EVs. Collaboration is necessary across government, industry, and academia. The future prospect of electric vehicle infrastructure. India aims to have at least 30% of its vehicles run on electricity by 2030. And then through the scheme FAME, it supports the establishment of charging infrastructure for EV in public places such as parking lots, bus depots, and metro stations. And then through National Hydrogen Energy Mission, they want to promote hydrogen fuel cells for transportation. This EV infrastructure will reduce the country's dependence on imported oil and mitigate the negative environmental impact of transportation. EV produces zero tailpipe emissions, which can improve the air quality. Zero tailpipe emission means no exhaust gases or other pollutants will be emitted when you use pure electricity. When you are using as an hybrid, then there is a pollution aspect. But when you are using pure electricity, there is a zero tailpipe emission. There is no exhaust gases or other pollutants which is emitted. So these are the future prospects. So the FAME is one of the things that helps. These are the very important things. The FAME scheme with the minimum range requirement for electric vehicles is leading the EV transition in India. For two-wheelers and private four-wheelers, charging at home and office is feasible since average daily distance travel is below the minimum range required. For two-wheelers and private four-wheelers, it is possible to charge at home. For commercial four-wheelers and intra-city public transport, large-scale public EV charging infrastructure is needed. And then setting up the public charging infrastructure is a daunting task. And then so alternate solutions are proposed, like installing charging points with residential complexes, housing society, shopping malls, parking lots, railway stations, offices, and small shops. Battery swapping stations could also be an alternate strategy, especially for electric three-wheelers. And then locating charging infrastructure on the premises of bulk demand driving agency could help to solve this particular problem. Electric buses in Bangalore has been introduced. So they were able to reduce the emissions. So these are the key feature of this electric buses in Bangalore. It was launched, the electric bus fleet in 2017. It talks about sustainability. It talks about cost effectiveness, infrastructure, and then adoption. In sustainability, the reduction in air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. These buses are using lithium-ion batteries, which are more efficient and environmental friendly compared to diesel engines. Cost effectiveness: electric buses are cost effective in the long run as they require less maintenance compared to diesel buses, and the cost of electricity is lower than the cost of diesel. Infrastructure: BMPTC, the Bangalore Metropolitan Transport Corporation, has set up charging stations across the city. And then adoption is like the BMTC has partnered with the World Resource Institute to conduct surveys and gather feedback from commuters to promote the adoption of electric buses. So this is one of the important points. Because of this introduction of electric buses, they were able to reduce 6,000 tons of carbon and saved around 2.8 million liters of diesel fuel since their launch in 2017. So the overall carbon footprint of Bangalore transportation system has reduced over a period of. This is the case study related to electric mobility. Now we look into a case study which was implemented, which was on the implementation phase in Visakhapatnam, non-motorized transportation. The Ministry of Urban Development with IBI Group and iTrans, they developed a guidance documents for city-specific plans for transit-oriented development, non-motorized transportation, and public bicycle sharing for Indian cities. So Visakhapatnam is chosen as one of the demonstration city for this NMT planning, and then they applied the 5-step planning process recommended in the guidance document prepared by the ministry. The project is aimed to develop a city-wide bicycle plan, for bicycle and pedestrian facilities, and projects to address the mobility needs of different segments of the population. Here they are trying to integrate the bicycle and pedestrian travel along with the transportation network. This plan includes projects, programs, and policies to improve the NMT network and connect people to city-wide destinations. They are following 5 principles. One is like to assess the current conditions, and then to enable. Third one is to plan and design. Fourth, invest, and fifth, to implement. These are the 5 steps as part of this particular 5 process they undertake to implement this particular project. This particular plan aims to connect commuters, students, children, disabled, and the elderly to city-wide destination. The nodal agency is Municipal Corporation of Visakhapatnam is the nodal agency for this particular project. This is the city profile. The city of Visakhapatnam is known as Vizag, which is a port city and the second largest urban agglomeration in the state of Andhra Pradesh. It has have a population of 17.3 lakhs and it has a greater Visakhapatnam Municipal Corporation, covering an area of 534 square kilometers. So it is along the coastal area. So most of the land uses are located along the coastal area. The CBD is located in the Jagadamba center. If you see this planning and policy context, first we are assessing the city in terms of its infrastructure network. Planning and policy context, Master Plan 2021, it was prepared in 2007. The plan briefly acknowledges the importance of pedestrian network. It doesn't allocate funds towards it in the investment plan and phasing of project. In City Development Plan 2012 also, the plan identifies infrastructure requirement. It does not include specific recommendation related to non-motorized transport infrastructure. These two plans had failed to recognize the NMT, but low carbon comprehensive mobility plan prepared in 2014, they recognized some of the stretches, and then they want to implement the bicycle and as well as pedestrian network. The LCMP includes proposals to upgrade 430 km of arterial and sub-arterial roads with safe footpaths and crossings, install segregated cycle tracks on roads with right-of-ways exceeding 30 meters. So they want to implement as part of this particular plan 2 bicycle sharing pilot schemes. Visakhapatnam Smart City proposal also, they want to do this in an area where transit, they want to integrate with the multimodal transportation. Walking and bicycling lanes, introducing handicap accessible walkways and multi-use, multi-level car parks with ground floor retail, bicycle parking and e-rickshaw parking around the transit corridors. They assessed the legislative and regulatory environment of Visakhapatnam and the transportation infrastructure, the road network hierarchy map, and then they assess the need assessments as a third process, and the fourth process is a readiness assessment. The legislative and regulatory environment, if you see the development control regulations in Visakhapatnam Master Plan aims to regulate urban development for the benefit of society and public safety. But it doesn't. This development control regulations of DCR doesn't take into account the non-motorized transport infrastructure in Visakhapatnam. Even the regulations for motorized vehicles, Andhra Pradesh motor vehicle rules also not looked into, or is not very supportive for NMT infrastructure. So policy level interventions are necessary to develop street design guidelines and incorporate NMT friendly recommendations. So development control regulations as well as the Andhra Pradesh motor vehicle doesn't give support to preparation of NMT plans. So there is a need. So transportation infrastructure, out of 77 kilometers out of 1,100 kilometers of urban roads are footpaths that are constructed or being constructed, but some of the footpaths are having encroachments such as parked vehicles, crossings and entry to properties along the road, blocking free movement of pedestrians. Need assessment has been done. The city of GVMC, Greater Visakhapatnam Municipal Corporation in Andhra Pradesh, has 70 kilometer stretch of national highways. 5 passing through it with varying speed limits and inadequate pedestrian infrastructure. There are 70 kilometer stretch which is passing through the GVMC area. So they have identified 40 high crash locations on this stretch. Pedestrian and two-wheeler are the most vulnerable road users in this particular stretches. So readiness assessment also done through using 5E approach related to engineering, education, encroachment, engineering, education, encouragement, enforcement, and evaluation. So the greater These are all related to assessing it. The Greater Visakhapatnam Municipal Corporation has initiated several initiatives to reduce transportation-related pollution in the city. The vehicle-free zone along 3.5 kilometers stretch of beach road, 3 planned cycling zones, vehicle-free day for GVMC employee, and the launch of cycling clubs were introduced as part of this. Other organizations in the cities are also adopted similar initiatives, such as Andhra University and Geetham University. The stakeholders for this particular involved in the NMT master plan include elected representatives, GVMC department, traffic police, academic institutions, NGOs, and others. So, if you see the summary, if you see more than half of the trips in the city are made on foot and only 3% are made by bicycle. More than 71% of the trips are within 3 kilometer length, so it is indicating the need for non-motorized transportation. The NH highway is running through the city and has a high rate of accidents. Only 77 kilometers of the city's 1,100 kilometers of urban roads have footpaths. So strategies to build, the second principle of this is like to enable. One is like first we are assessing the situation, then is enabling it. So several GVMC officials are supporting of cycling and walking. And the city has initiated new NMT projects such as cycle tracks and evaluation of EV systems. So other agencies are also supporting. So there is a need for NMT coordinator should partner with appropriate departments and organizations to carry out operations, management, and program functions. So there is a need for collaborative vision is needed to ensure continuity in NMT planning beyond the office term of officials. This is an objective of NMT. There are three main objectives. One is like mixed-use planning is encouraged in all development areas, accompanied by high-density development along major transit corridors. Then roads with proposed right-of-way 30 meter or higher should have segregated cycle tracks, and each road should be equipped with cycling track and bicycle parking facility. PBS network should cover a 3 kilometer radius around the main transit lines and feeder lines to provide. This is related. The smart city projects provide this infrastructure along the transit lines. Then the third step is like to plan and design. So these are the NMT guiding principles. There are some 10 principles. Interconnected NMT network, complete streets, bicycle friendliness, walkability, comfort, providing universal accessibility, safety, security, providing signages and protection from encroachment. And then there are supportive principles like transit priority, mixed use, supporting bicycle industry, bicycle, build cycling culture. All this is a part of this. These are the 7 strategies they have adopted for this particular project. Seamless NMT citywide network, integrating the land use and transport, safe route to parks and schools, public bicycle sharing, first and last mile connectivity, identifying the water bodies, that is blue waste recreational trail, retrofitting the existing streets. So signature projects they have taken cycling highway along the beach road and accessibility design for influence area of the proposed metro station. So identified in the plan and design, they have identified the proposed walking infrastructure. So 78 kilometer out of 430 kilometer of arterial and subarterial roads in the city have footpaths. In the long run, all roads, including the collector and access roads, needs to be transformed into pedestrian friendly. And then they identified the cycling infrastructure needed. And then they identified the proposed growth centers. They have identified the 2 areas. One is like PBS in the core city area, public bicycle sharing system in the core city area in the Jagadamba Center, as well as for BBS in the Gajoka area. They have identified these 2 projects. This is a part of low carbon mobility plan 2014. So they identified these 2 areas for implementation. And then they took into consideration that they have to establish the safe routes to parks and schools. So they have identified those routes in the Visakhapatnam city. And then they developed the first and last mile connectivity to the transit. And then they have identified some water channels and in Vizag. And then they did the retrofitting of the streets. They took the some 2 roads. One is like Old Central Jail Road, and then they have taken some 8 stretches like that. And then in these 8 stretches, they worked on the right of way to include the NMT provisions in this. Invest. So So GVMC through their budget, they are trying to invest 5.5 crores, and then the 10 crores has to be included for the PBS scheme also in this 11.6. They have taken as a pilot project 11.6 kilometer, and then they want to implement the NMT infrastructure as well as the public bicycling scheme. So the total estimate project cost comes 5 crores from the municipal corporation and 10 crores from the investors. So this is the bicycle project. So they were looking into the budget allocations, and then alternate financing options. If you see this, like they were looking on these options. These are the options not implemented, but they are looking in these options like polluter pay principles, and then private vehicle taxation, state transport duties, revenue reallocation, parking fee increase, and maximum parking norms. And then they are looking for unconventional financing sources like various transport charges, allocating municipal budget for NMT infrastructure implementation, integrating advertisement revenue for funding NMT infrastructure, establishing an NMT fund. So there are other ways also they are looking for funding for this particular project. Along with the metro also, if you see in Visakhapatnam, NMT projects can be bundled with the metro project, such as developing a 30-kilometer feeder route network with the provision for walk, cycle, auto rickshaw buses and other street amenities, and implementing the public bicycle sharing scheme. So implementation, if you see, this is the fifth aspect of this particular five-stage process, like involving the stakeholders. So what are the roles of each stakeholders? Politicians for building commitment and motivating the society, and then Visakhapatnam Urban Transport Company. It's a special purpose vehicle for BRT. It ensures the integration of the system with bicycle infrastructure like signages and signaling under PWD to support increased bicycle traffic volume. And then GVMC helps in the finance, accounts, ensuring integration of the system with public facility. UDA for provision of space for walking and cycling infrastructure. APSRTC for providing space for parking facility for PBS at the bus stops. Transport Department for providing the integration of walking and bicycle infrastructure like signaling, signages, for that particular purpose. Transport Department, Auto Rickshaw Drivers Union, and Traffic Police. So these are the stakeholders for implementing, and then the various roles are stressed. So we'll go into the growth. This is also one of the sustainable measures. One is like the growth of metro rail in Indian context. We have seen so far the electric mobility. Then we looked into the walking and cycling. Then we will look into the current status of the metro rail project in the country. If you see this, if you see the first project in 1984, it started in Kolkata as an underground 3.4 kilometer underground metro network. And then in 2002, it started in Delhi, the metro network. 8-kilometer stretch between Shahadara and Tisazari. They started this, and then if you see in 2014, there are 5 cities have implemented. In 2021, 18 cities. Now the metro passengers per day, which is catering today's context, is 85 lakh passengers per day. This metro network is catering. This is the status of the entire country, the metro network operational. If you see this, prior to 2014, about 248 kilometer metro network was operational in 5 cities. 484 kilometer operational network added after 2014 to 21 in 18 cities. These are the Metro Rail policy 2017. Because like the implementation cost, if you see for the Metro Rail is like, if you see that the cost, it is like it goes up to 280 crores to 320 crores for per kilometer stretch. So that is the amount of cost required to build this particular infrastructure. So most of the cities are not getting that relevant funding. So there was a Metro Rail project 2013. So they emphasized these aspects so that the financing can be looked more than the fare box revenue. They call it as a fare box revenue. More than the fare box revenue, they can look for other revenues so that the metro project can be implemented. Land value capture and transit-oriented development to improve the financial viability. And then multimodal, if you see this particular policy, this stresses about all this, multimodal integration and last mile connectivity. Promotion of unbundled public-private partnership, flexibility of different financial models, project evaluated for economic returns and social viability, constitution of Unified Metropolitan Transport Authority, avenues of mobilizing capital at reasonable cost through issuance of bonds. Using the bond market also, they try to capture some amount of funding for the metro project, and through land value capture also they can able to do. So these are the two aspects which are stressed as part of the metro rail project to implement the projects. Regional rapid transit system. This was the first time a regional rapid transit system was established in National Capital Region, connecting Delhi and Meerut. These are the very key features, like Delhi to Meerut in 55 minutes and Delhi Ghaziabad Meerut 82-kilometer RTTS under construction. This is at the regional level connectivity. A metro project has been established for the first time. And then there were some projects related to Metro Light, because the metro we are not able to implement. So they bought a concept called Metro Light. Metro Light is a low-cost mass rapid transit system with same experience and ease of travel in terms of comfort, convenience, safety, punctuality, reliability, and environmental friendliness as of conventional metro system. This metro light, it's like if you see the cost of this metro light is 40% of the conventional metro. It is 120 to 140 crore per kilometer. Earlier it was like for the elevated corridors, it is 280 to 320 crore per kilometer, but now it is 120 to 140 because it is a metro, because it caters to peak hour direction traffic up to 15,000. It's a low-cost mobility solution. 60 km per hour is the maximum speed. Unmanned stations, segregated section interlocked with the road traffic. So, and then they brought another concept in India, like Metro Line, Metro Neo. This is being planned in Nasik and Maharashtra. This is also, if you see this is a rubber-tired electric coaches powered by overhead traction system, running on road slab with exclusive right-of-way with the same experience and ease of travel in terms of comfort and other parameters. If you see this cost of Metro Neo is 25% of the conventional metro. It is 70 to 80 crore per kilometer. So these are the for very small size towns and cities. They are aiming at it. Water Metro. Water Metro is a unique urban mass transit system. It was implemented. It was like they started operationalizing in June 2021. It is going to be fully operational. It has 1 lakh daily ridership. It has 15 routes, 78 kilometer route kilometer, connecting 10 islands, reduced travel time and increased reliability, universal accessibility, 78 ports and 45 terminals, multimodal integration and last mile connectivity, employment opportunities and socio-economic development. So these are the emission norms. If you see the Central Pollution Control Board, they brought some emissions like which is called as Bharat stage norms, which was implemented in 2000, and now it is like 2020-24. Bharat norms nationwide has started, and then there is a significant impact in the air quality in Indian context. There are alternate fuels which are also implemented in Indian context. So I'll come to the conclusion. Like there is if you see the policies in other countries, people are, if you see the Taipei as well as Jiangsu, they are moving towards public transportation systems from the two-wheeler by optimizing their route network. This is another research study which talks about low carbon mobility solutions for urban India. It talks about how to reduce emissions by increasing the ridership in Indian cities. Way forward, traditional urban mobility policies are mainly focused on widening and construction of roads, flyovers, and underpasses to counter these externalities. Our policy framework to achieve sustainable transportation should acknowledge that transportation is a derived demand and the need to travel can be reduced through compact city form and mixed communities. Critical emphasis on efficient non-motorized transport and affordable, accessible, and safe public transport system has been proven as effective solution to rising motorized two-wheeler traffic. Attitude and behavior changes foremost for the NMT implementation in Indian cities, along with affordable public transportation in place. Change from private to public transport mode is utmost priority for bringing down emissions. The need to identify, assess, and address existing barriers to sustainability is crucial in developing any policy vision framework for achieving sustainable and resilient urban mobility. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Uh, Thank you for your discerning, judicious, and insightful presentation on sustainable urban transport. Hello. Now, I would like to move towards the question answer session. Um, Questions from our audience are welcome. Any questions? Kindly text in the chat box even. If no questions, then shall I conclude? Hello, am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Yeah, yes. I think if there are no questions, we can conclude.
Yeah. Okay. So, any questions?
Yeah. Madam, in the chat back.
Yeah, there is a question in the chat box. How to ensure sustainable transportation needs are met in growing cities and towns that are inclusive of people with all abilities? I would request the speakers of the sessions, anyone. Question is for whom? Hello. Valyapan sir?
Yes.
Shall you take this question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, ma'am, Stephanie ma'am, if you want to take out. Anyone. Ma'am, would you like to take a call on this?
Okay, sorry, I thought Mr. Valiapan is going to respond. I think I really like the question because kind of this idea of inclusivity of transport is very much in the heart of also what UN Habitat is promoting in terms of sustainable urban mobility. And I think the key here is really universal access. It has been mentioned, I think, by a few of us in the presentations that we have done, that universal access is really the key principles if you want to ensure accessibility for all. And I think there is sometimes a bit of a challenge because very often we would focus on the physical accessibility. So we would maybe be thinking about the ramps to the public transport stations, then we would try to make the street designs maybe very accessible in terms of not having obstacles. But we maybe sometimes forget other needs. So people that are, for example, visually impaired, people that are hearing impaired, the elderly, pregnant women. There are so many people that have different needs. And I think there is really probably in nearly all cities around the world, there's really need to focus on this universal aspects in terms of all abilities that are out there and not just with the focus on the physical aspects. One way to gain insights, I think it's really through focus group discussions in the planning and the design stage of mobility projects. That, for example, focus groups are being organized with, for example, women groups or with people from the community of the disabled or elderly or children, and to really understand their very specific needs that they have, maybe in form of street audits or interviews that you really grasp very, very specifically what is it that would make a transport system very accessible to them. And I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And thank you very much for this question.
Thank you, ma'am. I hope Sri Charan got the answer. Any other question? I think we should conclude now, sir. So, another question. Given the car-centric cities that are being built over the decades, I wanted to ask the above question on behalf of Hyderabad Cycling Revolution team that I am a part of, wherein we are requesting the government to build inclusive, sustainable transport infrastructure, envisioning livable cities for future generation. Will you come on the screen? अच्छा ठीक है. Okay, fine. He is satisfied with the answer. Thank you, Sri Charan. Now I would like to conclude today's session. All were very insightful, and I would like to highlight the extracts of the knowledge disseminated by the eminent speakers today. Our first speaker was Stephanie, and she focused upon the concerns related to multimodality in Metro City, also about the green technology innovations and the design, and she focused upon how to design for efficiency. She talked about the avoid, shift, and improvement framework, which is very insightful, definitely. And she concluded with a very concrete thought process that we shall design city for the people, not for the cars. That is really need of an hour. Thank you, Stephanie. And Yuki also added and strengthened the thought process by enriching about the transit-orient development. We are actually studying about the transit-orient development, but Sir has given a very different kind of insights that how UN Habitat is also working upon it. So he talked about the lack of public transport investment leading to urban sprawl, how it is leading to urban sprawl. He also discussed about streamlining the transport management and organizing the road traffic. He discussed about the spatial scale of TOT. He also talked about 3Ds in TOT. That is very interesting. And even our third speaker, Valiyappan sir, spoke about the sustainable urban transport. Basically, what are all the different projects, policies, and different transport measures are taken in our country, India. So it was very insightful. I hope all enjoyed the session. It is very enriching session, and ma'am also given some answer to Sri Charan, I think. I hope Sri Charan got the answer. Thank you. And now I would like to give the vote of thanks to all of the people who present over here. First, I would like to thank our director, Professor Dr. Ramesh Kunda sir, for giving an opportunity to organize this workshop in collaboration with UN Habitat. And I would also like to thank our eminent speakers for today's workshop series, Ms. Stephen Holsworth and Mr. Yuki Takada. Hello. And architect Valiyappan for sparing their valuable time to enrich the entire audience joined over here. I would like to thank deans, heads, faculty, students, and staff for joining the session. I also take an opportunity to thank the IT support for their efforts to streamline the event flawless without any hurdle. And I would like to thank Dr. Adinarayan sir for coordinating this event with smooth conduction. And I would like to thank, last but not the least, to Dr. Fayaz behind the scenes managing the Google Meet session. And thank you all. With this, I would like to take a permission to close the session.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Best regards.
Valuable time.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.